Hello, and welcome to this week's Focus on Geothermal Energy for the Weekend webinar. My name is Alexander Richter. I'm the founder of Think Energy. With me today is Rebecca Nye. She is the Chief Experience Officer at Enovate AI, a London, UK-based company, and also treasurer at the Women in Geothermal in the UK. Rebecca will talk today about AI-driven geothermal transparency and compliance here in the context of emissions control and data. But she'll definitely be more able to explain in a bit more detail what this is about. We're pleased to have her here. We also thank Enerchange, our partner to the webinar series. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the question panel of the dashboard. And we will then, after the presentation, go through the questions if we have time. With that, I'm handing over the word to Rebecca. Rebecca, nice to have you.
Yes, thank you, Alexander. Really appreciate the introduction. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. I will try to get through the slides a little bit quick. I'm sure everybody is just about to start their weekend. So as Alexander mentioned, I'm going to talk about environmental claims management and what we've been doing in terms of the geothermal industry when it comes to looking at your environmental claims. So I work for Enovate AI. I'm the Chief Experience Officer looking at all things client related and their experience with our company. And also, as Alex mentioned, I am the treasurer for WING UK, that's Women in Geothermal within the UK. And I just want to do a small plug and just say that we are looking for sponsorship for this coming year. So if anybody in the company is interested, please drop me a line. It's a very good cause, helping to drive knowledge with geothermal within the UK, especially within the universities. So just popping that in there. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about environmental claims management. So Enovate AI has participated in this solution in driving the AI piece. It has been led by Blockchain for Energy, which is the largest energy consortium based out of Houston. You can look it up. They're doing a lot of good work in terms of helping the energy industry move forward in terms of digitalization of the industry itself, and they've been leading this particular solution that we'll discuss a little bit later. So I wanted to do a very brief introduction on emissions. I think it's not always a topic that we've naturally been introduced to throughout our careers or throughout our education. Myself, my background is geology. I worked in petrophysics, etc. So emissions wasn't a particular topic that I learned through my career. It's something that I've recently been involved in, something that was quite a steep learning curve. There's a lot of complexities to understand around the technology, around the regulatory systems, the compliance system, the government, etc. It's very complex. So I'll do a very brief introduction in the way that I've been understanding how it impacts us in the industry, and I hope this kind of helps everybody else kind of gain a little bit of understanding when it comes to emissions management. So generally, there are three mechanisms used for emissions management. It's the CRUs, which is the carbon removal units. So carbon removal units, they're generally, when it comes to how we're taking carbon out of the environment, things like CCUS, etc. So that mechanism is reserved for the removal of greenhouse gas emissions within the environment. Then CETs, so CETs stands for carbon emissions trading. So this is looking at incentivizing companies to drive their sustainability forward. Can be widely used by many industries, but within energy, oil and gas companies may use this to report, to measure, and also get financial incentives from reducing their emissions. And lastly, RECs. So this is renewable energy certificates. This is the most important mechanism for geothermal. This is how geothermal can become more cost effective because you're able to sell these renewable energy certificates. They are used for all types of renewable energy, but this is something very important to the geothermal industry. So I'll talk a little bit more about the renewable energy certificates. So what do? Well, they create a way of having proof that that renewable energy was created. So just here, so one certificate is equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable electricity. Now, one certificate can be sold. The price at which it can be sold varies vastly. I think generally between $1 and $5, but sometimes up to $50, depending on where it's being sold and in what time it's being sold. It's quite a fluctuating market itself. Also, the use of that renewable energy credit. So that can be used by companies to try and meet their sustainability targets. But a big use for the geothermal industry is to sell that renewable energy certificate in order to lower the levelized cost of electricity, which of course is very important when you're planning and developing geothermal plants. And lastly, just having the availability to do this helps support the renewable energy market. This makes it more interesting to capital markets to invest as they know that they're going to be able to monetize on the production of renewable energy. So now you might say, okay, renewable energy certificate, I've got a couple of solar panels on my house. Now I just need to get that certified and I can sell it. Well, I think it's a lot more complicated than that and probably not worth your time when it comes to your solar panels in your house. This is the process laid out in 5 steps, but it's very complex and difficult to navigate sometimes. Obviously, the energy needs to be generated. Step 1, energy generated. So geothermal plant generates the energy. Then, you need to be registered, different entities to be registered with, depending on location, in order to certify that you are producing renewable energy. Verification of the data, extremely important to have that data verified, that it isn't true, it isn't inflated, people aren't greenwashing. Then the REC, the certificate, is issued. Now, when the certificate is issued, it needs to be tracked. Now, that is one of the problems that we'll talk about, is the tracking and the traceability of the certificates. How do we overcome that? And how do we make sure people aren't double counting, triple counting? And then the retirement of the certificate once it is sold. And obviously, we need to make sure that it's only sold once and it's not sold twice or 3 times. That's another problem when it comes to emissions management. So I've spoken a little bit about the problems. This is just them laid out when it comes to anything to do with emissions management, the carbon removal units, the carbon emissions trading, and the RECs. So obviously the inaccuracy of data, the lack of data, we need to have the data in order to even start the process. And that's not always available. That's not always accurate. Trust and transparency, it's a big deal because if it's not transparent, people can be greenwashing, people can be overcounting, and that's not the point of net zero. That's not the point in being more sustainable. Resource and cost intensive. Some companies may have teams and teams of people working on this, and they still get it wrong. I'm sure everybody's seen in the news companies making mistakes, greenwashing, double counting, and then receiving hefty fines for that. So they're putting a lot of money in to try and do it correctly, but there's always room for error when it's a human managed process. And lastly, standards. We need to have the standards across the board so that we're all working from the same play sheet. That's essentially the problems that we have to overcome when it comes to the emissions management. So, so you have the problems, of course. When it comes to geothermal power plants, you must go down the route of RECs in order to make things more financially viable. And in addition, there are other demands on the industry itself. Demands when it comes to the types of technology, what the markets want to see, what the government wants to see, what regulations are being put in place, and also what the customers want to see. And in general, everybody wants to be driving towards digitalization, obviously optimization, trying to optimize energy production as much as you can, decentralization, decarbonization, of course, that's why we're here, and the customization. In today's world, everybody wants to be able to customize everything to their needs, specifically their needs. So these are certain demands that are put on the industry, as well as all the problems we have to overcome. We need to also meet the demands of the new energy business models. So utilizing technology. So the technology that we can utilize in order to go down the route of digitalization of industries is IoT, blockchain, and AI. Of course, IoT helps us with automation and simplifying the process. Blockchain brings that security, that decentralization. It really ties everything together for those immutable records that must be created when you're digitalizing within the industry, so people can't lie and cheat, essentially. And then AI drives decision making and all the optimization that is required, in order to keep the industry moving forward and towards the sustainable goals. Now, we have those pieces of technology, but what really makes this work and how you can really put it all together into a system that solves all the problems and the demands of the industry is the convergence of the technologies. So converging blockchain, IoT, and AI machine learning in order to overcome the problems and meet the demands. Of course, IoT and blockchain brings that level of security to your IoT data flow. The benefits of that obviously bring a lot of trust. IoT and AI. So IoT now has the capability to process data in ways that we couldn't before using artificial intelligence. And then AI and blockchain. Blockchain again brings that level of security and also to render that data immutable. So, that it hasn't been messed with, it hasn't been something done to it to make it look different than it actually is. So, we've had limitations in the past with data processing. We've overcome them with IoT and AI, and of course with blockchain to bring that security, which means things can now be scalable and a lot more automated than in the past. So when it comes to the power generation, we spoke about the problems that can hinder that creation of the renewable energy credits. Of course, like I mentioned, the lack of data or the inaccuracy of the data. There needs to be transparency for that trust. We need to make it less labor intensive and less manual, and also following the standards. So, when putting the solution together, obviously what the team of experts came up with was just getting that data to be accurate and having it in a standardized format. That's extremely important. Bringing in blockchain for them immutable records, streamlining everything, making it effortless for the person trying to create the rec, and of course complying with the standards at the same time. Easier said than done. So, obviously the solution that I wanted to talk about today, B4ECarbon, this is a solution led by Blockchain for Energy. Now, as you can see, we've tried to outline the process that you would go through in order to have your renewable energy certificate created and eventually sold, etc., or in general, just bring more sustainability to your operations. So obviously, step 1 and 2 is all about the operational data and the optimization. So the data being delivered, the data being processed, digital twins being created in order to optimize. The DMRV. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. It's very important in the process. This is the digital measurements, reporting, and verification piece. And then, of course, you have the trading. So Totem Earth, that's just one example of a marketplace where you can go to trade your certificates. And of course, the standardization of claims and reporting. Here we have the Interwork Alliance. And then lastly, step 5 is bringing it all back together, because now that you've gone through the process, what do you need to do? Are you doing the best you can do, or can you lower emissions? Because even geothermal plants will have emissions. You know, obviously, when it comes to oil and gas, there will be emissions. So can you optimize? Can you do things better? Do you need to do things better in order to meet the goals that your company has set for sustainability? So just a little bit more detail when it comes to the DMRV. So as I mentioned, this is the digital measurements, reporting, and verification application. So it's kind of where the magic happens, I guess. But so as you see, you input the data, and what we've been focusing on is the renewable energy data. So that energy has been created, you have the data, input to the system. Within the system, everything has predefined structures that follow policy requirements, emissions calculation, all using open source policies and standards, and of course Hedera Hashgraph, for the distributed ledger, which is the consensus mechanism for everything within there. And the output should be the creation of your carbon emissions token, your carbon removal unit, or your renewable energy certificate. So while it's a very complex methodology, tried to simplify it here, and also just simplify it for the user, for the person trying to do this. It doesn't take teams and teams. Everything can be done on the back end with that visibility with blockchain. Obviously, report automation. This is extremely important because having reports for this being automated just minimizes the level of resources required and can be done at a click of a button, rather than taking weeks and weeks and hours of effort. And lastly, I wanted to tie it all together. When it comes to energy production, in particular geothermal, obviously you want to automate everything as much as possible. You have those control systems, you need to deliver that IoT data. You want to optimize utilizing AI and ML is the best way forward for optimization, predicting the operations, having forecasting not only of your energy production, but also things like your emissions as well. So you can see if you're going down the wrong route and you need to do something to change that. And lastly, what we've been talking about today is essentially intelligent decarbonization. So utilizing a system, an end-to-end system that takes the data from that renewable energy being created, and eventually that can be traded in order to monetize on that, which in turn makes a geothermal project more financially viable, which is something that we're all driving towards as much as we can in different ways, utilizing technology, etc. So with that, I'll conclude. I do have a small quote from Ada Lovelace. For those of you that don't know who Ada Lovelace is, she is the woman that created the woman that worked first on computer science. So you can look her up. But ultimately, it's impossible for us to know everything, even though we would like to. That is why we rely on technology, and that is why we rely on teams. And behind this solution, there is a large team. Rebecca Hoffman, she's the head of blockchain for energy. Camilo Mejia, the head of Enovate AI, played a pivotal role in this. And of course, Richard Dwell, who is one of the experts in emissions management and is part of blockchain for energy. So I will be very happy to answer any questions. And if I can't answer it, I will point you in the direction of the right expert. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Rebecca, thank you so much. Very, very, of course, interesting, and of course, for let's say some of us that are maybe a little bit naive or inexperienced on artificial intelligence, it's still quite amazing or difficult to understand kind of what it can do to see. So a practical, let's say, implication here definitely very interesting. But of course, any systems is as good as the data that you can get. So the question in regards to the emission control, of course, the input of the data needs to come from somewhere. Do you work with, let's say, technology providers that provide some of their technology to measure, let's say, emissions, or how does that interplay look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's very important that we work with a technology provider for the data, and obviously that data flow for it to be seamless. It's good to have a relationship there. I will say that within this process, Enovate AI works with Emerson within North America, which provides us with the data required in order to put into the system. But as we go forward, we will get more and more data because obviously different types of data will be required as we go. But I think when it comes to geothermal, I think we're in a good place in terms of acquiring data from those geothermal sites.
I guess that everyone that wants to use technology, of course, in the context of them selling the renewable credits or to certify these credits, is willing to share the data with you. But is there then some kind of, let's say, anonymous kind of input of this data into the models that you do and that are then made available across? So how does that interplay look like?
Sorry, Alexander, you're breaking up a little bit, and I'm not sure if it's you or if it's me.
I'll try again. So,
I don't know if other people are experiencing the same, but it's kind of broken.
I'll change the headphones. 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I just, yeah, so talking about technology, Bluetooth kind of let me down. So to the wired headphones, sorry about that. No, I was asking about the data and the interplay with the data. Of course, your system kind of learns from the more data that you use. But I guess each customer kind of that uses your system to report on renewable energy credits or certificates, I guess, is interested in sharing the data to make this valid and work. But do you then use that data, let's say, in an anonymized form, kind of to train your model and make it available across, let's say, various customer groups and regions? How does that work?
So yes and no, I guess would be the answer to that question. So in some cases the data is used. Obviously, it's completely you can't really tell where the data is coming from. But then in some cases it's not utilized. It's something private to the customer, and obviously it depends on certain laws and rules around the world as well. We have some restrictions on that, so something you need to be careful to navigate, I guess.
And of course, I guess the geothermal world prides itself in being one of the clean renewable energy technologies. But of course, I guess in the context of let's say the traditional volcanic-based, flash-based kind of turbine technologies, there are some emissions, and I guess that's your core market. Are those regions, correct?
Yeah, and I think, that's why we have the three different mechanisms because, what we need to be careful of is that yes, there's being renewable energy created, but there's also being emissions that need to be accounted for as well. And that's something that, accounting for emissions, while, creating the renewable energy certificates as well. And also carbon removal, right? If you use carbon, CO2 for a working fluid, etc., you could also go down that route of claiming to have removed carbon from the environment as well. So I think there's a lot that people can do in order to offset the emissions that are created.
Um, and of course, kind of going a little bit further here, I mean, here's the question. I'm not sure if you can answer, but kind of what projects or what countries kind of have utilized your technology already?
North America, so within the United States. I think the United States is moving quickly forward with this. It's a compliance market, so in terms of things like this, you need to go forward with it. There are also places that would be a voluntary market where this system can also help with because it gives them a mechanism for trading as well. But this is it. Some when it comes to emissions management, we have to move in this direction. There is no other choice. To have teams and teams of people working on something and then making mistakes, that looks very bad for certain companies. So you need something that is seamless and transparent, and mistakes won't be made. And that's obviously we rely on technology for that in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions that I had here in the sense of, what the degree is of the IT implementation here for a geothermal facility that it needs basically to use the B4E system. And do you find that these projects kind of generally are at this level, or is that very, very different?
Well, a lot of the projects are early stage, right? So, we're still building on it as the projects are getting off the ground. And I think that's something important, that it's easier to build on something when you start, and also to take this into account when, let's say your company is planning a geothermal plant. If you can take this into account in an accurate way when you're looking at your um, financial models, then that's going to help you not only get investment, but also, manage your finances as well. So I think when it comes to geothermal, it's more about when things are getting off the ground. So you put everything in place, but the system itself is a cloud-based system that's done through blockchain for energy. The most important piece is to have that data. That's what we need: the sensors and the data.
I mean, and of course, I guess if you look at this broader, let's say beyond, let's say the emission context for geothermal, there's of course this question basically: how can we as an industry utilize AI already in exploration with the data at hand, and how can it help us model kind of to make, let's say, drilling more successful, or understand, let's say, the composition of let's say the geology, etc. I mean, how does that play in? And are you then as a company also working on that? I mean, we're looking at utilizing the oil data, for example, for, let's say, retrofit of oil wells, etc. I mean, these kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of the system all coming together. If you have the measurements, you're already one step ahead. And then, with ourselves, Enovate AI, we deploy AI in different phases of the well. We do drilling as well. Optimizing drilling is one of our major things that we do as well within geothermal industry. And it's very important because every penny counts, and you need to optimize how much you're spending, and you need to remain within your financial constraints. So in terms of artificial intelligence, we're using it a lot. We do most of our work with real-time data in order to optimize as we go on the spot. and make those decisions quickly in real time.
And I mean, let's say from a context, I mean, in the geothermal world, we talk a lot that we can so much learn from the oil and gas sector that, of course, is drilling way more wells than geothermal has over the years, and the experiences in that. I mean, your current business, I assume it also includes the oil and gas sector. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we really work across the board. I mean, oil and gas and geothermal is where we work primarily. But we also work in other industries like CCUS. There's a lot to be done. The biggest part of the business is in and around energy production, and of course that's a huge drive for the oil and gas industry, is to optimize that production of oil and gas. So that's another big piece that we do. And actually, a lot of what we've done in oil and gas has been transferable into geothermal as well. Obviously, you need to tweak things and change things, but in terms of, going down the route of forecasting, there's a lot you can apply that we did in oil and gas into geothermal. And that's what makes it, just very beneficial for geothermal managing to carry those lessons and that technology over into the geothermal realm as well.
And I guess, I mean, it's great that you say that, because I mean, like I said, I mean, let's say there are certain sentiments again, with regards to oil and gas production and fossil fuels and geothermal as a renewable energy technology. But of course, the experience and the data gained from oil and gas development is something tremendously valuable for geothermal, right? And
Yeah.
and the context of that data playing into these models, I mean, that interaction would be very interesting to kind of to learn a little bit more, kind of how, from a data perspective, kind of how do these models then evolve to utilize that data in the context of, let's say, more water production?
Yeah. And I think that's, where we have this, huge, transferable skills and transferable knowledge that we can bring from oil and gas and into geothermal. I spent a lot of my career in oil and gas. I was drilling and downhole tools, so I kind of stepped into geothermal somewhat, but the market was a lot smaller. But I think just in terms of, formation evaluation, also looking at and just energy production, it's huge. It's subsurface, let's say. I mean, the transferable skills of somebody that works within the subsurface realm from oil and gas to geothermal is kind of a perfect match, a reservoir engineer, for instance. So, and that's actually a lot of people that work within Enovate, they have experience in both. So they may have worked in oil and gas, but now they work in geothermal, and it's quite easy to transfer that knowledge.
I mean, I guess, I'm just trying to make sense here of one of the questions that I get here, and I guess, and of course, working in geothermal development, I mean, we see that the data availability is often a challenge. And then the context of making data available and to evaluate this is the question here is, from a geological point of view, kind of in a sense of centralizing data and collecting data and making it available. How much does, let's say, play in here, like, let's say, a government role in making data available, or forcing, let's say, companies to make data available into your model? Because of course, the more data you have, the better are your models going forward. How does that look like in reality?
There's a lot of public data. Obviously, different countries have different rules around what they need to publish, what they need to make public. But there is public data available when it comes from oil and gas, which you can utilize, when examining potential for geothermal. One of the projects that we recently worked on was with Geothermal Ukraine, and to look at the geothermal potential there. And there was data available, but it was very old. It was from the 80s. but it's amazing how much data is actually out there. This was data from a project that was conducted in the 80s to see the geothermal viability in a region in Ukraine. And they had that data. We were able to work with that data. Obviously, you need to digitize a lot of data, which can be time consuming. And obviously, sometimes you may question the accuracy of the data, and that's where it's tricky how accurate the data is. Obviously, the newer the data, it should be more accurate. But I think the geothermal industry as a whole, we do need to share data. We do need to have that ability to share data, because there isn't a lot out there, like in terms of when you look at the oil and gas industry. And I guess as we progress, there'll be more and more data available. But it's tricky because each country has their different rules around that and how they wish to do that as well. But hopefully we move towards a space where we are sharing data more openly, and obviously in a secure fashion as well.
But I guess, I mean, like you indicated, I mean, the more data that you have, let's say, from any kind of geological setting, the more the system can learn and predict certain, let's say, geological outcomes for drilling operations. Correct? Is that kind of roughly how?
It is. You can't overfeed models, but in general, if the better your data you have, and some data is more useful than other data, and that's one of the things that we focus on at Enovate is when we're receiving the data, is looking at which data is actually going to be useful in this model, because not all data needs to go into it. Some may have such a small impact on the outcomes that you just don't need to put it in. And then also you don't want to overfeed models, etc. So more data is better in general, but yeah, you don't always need tons and tons of data. And the key is, and this is, I'm sure Enovate is not the only one looking at this, but it's about, using our knowledge, our scientific knowledge, our engineering knowledge, and applying that within the AI and machine learning. So, you have that physics-based AI. So we do look at, some real world examples and try to understand exactly how to get the most precise and accurate outcomes.
Okay, but maybe then let's say concretely now going to let's say a geothermal developer that is, let's say, developing a geothermal project in, let's say, in volcanic settings somewhere in the world, kind of engaging and utilizing AI, kind of what would be, let's say, a step-by-step approach or model to consider to include AI into the processes of project development until, let's say, operation, and then of course, in your case, then the emission control aspect. Kind of how would you kind of like in layman terms kind of describe that process of integrating AI in the development process?
So I guess, AI can be integrated in many different ways and in very simple ways if that's what you want to do. But in general, right from the get-go, when you're doing the planning, you can utilize AI in forecasting financial outcomes. There's also something that we do is when you're initially planning, your geothermal plant, your location, we can take all the data, whatever data you have, and look at the financial forecast of the project, years into the future. Look at everything, all the costs from drilling the wells and implementing the plant and starting to generate electricity. Then AI can be utilized in optimizing most of your operations, drilling operations. I think it can be very important to optimize your drilling operations. And then as you bring the plant on board, just looking at that production of electricity and how to optimize that by forecasting into the future, as well as your emissions. So AI can be used at any stage. And, if you have data, you can look at how to apply AI. And AI really comes with that, fast decision making and that optimization. So, if you're looking at, if you want to look at, many, many, many different scenarios in order to pick the best one, you can utilize AI for that. And it can help you make any decision throughout the life cycle of your geothermal plant.
Yeah, exciting to follow the AI path. I mean, we of course we're using this as well, but probably more on a more general business
Well,
business perspective.
and just, one other thing, I mean, the hot topic right now, I guess, is generative AI, right?
Yeah,
And it should be the hot topic because that is changing the world as we know, right?
yeah,
And that's something we utilize in Enovate as well. So, like at a click of a button, you can get any information that you want about anything to do with your geothermal plant or your oil and gas operations. You can have a automated report exactly how you need it at the click of a button, and it's just something that just opens up the door to just huge efficiencies. And of course there are aspects that we need to be cautious of, but this kind of changes the world for us a little bit in being more efficient and doing things in that customizable way as well.
excellent. I mean, like I said, I mean, I think from a Think Energy perspective, there's several AI questions that I would have with regards to strategy and extracting of data. Let's say, I guess, in a slightly different context, but it is definitely very, very interesting to see, let's say, the more real life applications and how it can help geothermal, let's say, to work with, interact, and also learn, let's say, from oil and gas and the data that we share. And of course, that also amplifies or makes it important that we as an industry even share data or more data than we currently do across the board. And then I guess, I think governments that make this sharing of data, let's say, yeah, a requirement is actually very positive for the development. Yeah, but it's definitely great to see and learn what you're doing, and keep us posted on how things go. And we will definitely follow up on these things of what you do. And like I said, I mean, I think we as an industry kind of would like to learn more, kind of all the innovation happening, and I guess AI is an important part of it. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today, and your presentation. And we're looking forward to kind of to hear more from you in the future.
No, thank you very much, Alexander. I really appreciate it. And, we'd love to come back and show a real life case study at some point as soon as we get permission. I think that would be really interesting for the geothermal industry to see
It would
this
be indeed,
in
and
the
then
real
we'll
world.
have you back.
Great.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Rebecca.
Thank you so much.
Have a great
Thank you,
weekend,
everyone.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye bye.